It was a night I will never forget. Everything seemed normal at first. The quiet house, the soft hum of the fan, and the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. I had just fallen into a deep sleep after a long, exhausting day. Little did I know that this peaceful night would soon turn into one of the most shocking experiences of my life. My son had been acting differently for weeks. At first, I thought it was just a phase. A little moodiness, staying out late, and a few lies about where he was going. But something in my heart told me there was more to it. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that teenagers often test boundaries, and I hoped he would soon come back to his senses. That night, I was completely unaware of what was about to happen. I had locked the doors and windows as usual and thought the house was safe and quiet. The clock showed it was past midnight when I suddenly felt a presence near my bed. At first, I thought it was a dream, but when I opened my eyes, I saw my son standing there, hesitating and trembling. He didn't say a word. Instead, he slowly moved closer and I noticed his hands shaking. There was a strange look on his face, a mix of fear, confusion, and something I couldn't quite understand. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. "Take it easy, son," I whispered softly, not wanting to startle him. "What's going on?" He looked down, unable to meet my eyes, and then he finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Mom, I didn't mean to wake you. I just needed someone to talk to." I felt my heart ache for him. Whatever he was going through, it was clearly heavy on his mind. I patted the bed beside me and said, "Come sit. You can tell me anything." Slowly he sat down, still trembling slightly. I reached out and held his hand, hoping to give him some comfort. It was one of those rare moments when the walls between us seemed to disappear, and the worry in his eyes made me realize how much pain he was hiding. He started to open up, telling me about the pressures he felt at school, the friends he didn't trust, and the mistakes he was scared to admit. There was a raw honesty in his voice that both surprised and broke me. For so long, I had sensed a distance growing between us, but now, sitting there in the quiet darkness, I saw the vulnerable boy beneath the tough exterior. The night stretched on as he shared things he had never said before. It wasn't easy for him to be so honest, I could see that. But each word seemed to lift a weight off his chest. And as he talked, I realized how much I needed to listen without judgment. I told him, "Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is learning from them. You're not alone, and you never have to be." Tears welled up in his eyes. I don't remember exactly how long we talked, but by the time the first light of dawn crept through the window, something had changed between us. There was a fragile new bond, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. That night stayed with me for weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about the fear and confusion in my son's eyes and how close we had come to losing each other. It made me realize that love and trust must be nurtured every day, and that silence can sometimes be the greatest barrier between two people. The days after were not easy. We both struggled to find the right words and actions to heal the gap. But slowly, with patience and understanding, things began to shift. My son started opening up more often, sharing small moments and thoughts that once would have been hidden. We talked about boundaries, respect, and the importance of being honest with each other. It was not about blaming or punishment, but about creating a space where trust could grow again. There were times when old fears and doubts crept back in, but each time we faced them together. I learned that forgiveness is not just for the other person, it's also for yourself. And my son learned that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. Through it all, I held on to hope. Hope that our family could heal, that mistakes would become lessons, and that love would guide us forward. Looking back, I realize how that night was a turning point. It was a moment when silence was broken and truth found its way to the surface. And although the road ahead was uncertain, I knew we were no longer walking it alone. This story is not about shame or guilt. It is about the complicated, painful, but ultimately beautiful process of healing and rediscovering connection. If you are watching this and feeling lost or hurt, please remember, no matter how dark the night, there is always a dawn waiting to break. Reach out, speak your truth, and know that you are not alone. After that night, the house felt different. It was quieter in some ways, but also warmer. There was a tension, yes, the kind that comes with knowing something important has shifted. But underneath, a fragile thread of hope was growing. In the days that followed, I tried to be more present for my son. I noticed the small things, how he avoided eye contact sometimes, how he would sit on the edge of his chair during dinner, and how he kept his phone close but didn't always answer it. I didn't want to pressure him, but I wanted him to know I was there whenever he needed. One afternoon as I was cleaning the kitchen, he came up behind me quietly. "Mom," he said, hesitating. I turned to face him and he looked down for a moment before meeting my eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked. My heart skipped a beat. "Of course," I replied softly. We sat down at the table and this time he seemed a little more steady. He told me about the problems he was facing at school, not just with grades but with friendships that felt more like battles. He said he was scared of disappointing me, scared of being judged, and scared of losing the little trust we had left. I listened without interrupting, letting him pour out his worries. Sometimes the best thing a parent can do is just listen. Not to fix or lecture but to hear. "I know I've made mistakes," he said, "and I know I've been distant. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose this." His words hit me hard. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You won't," I promised. "We'll work through this. Together." From that day on, things slowly began to change. We started spending more time together, doing simple things, cooking dinner, watching movies, even going for short walks. These moments were small but powerful. They gave us chances to rebuild trust and create new memories. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching an old comedy, I noticed him laugh freely. It was the first genuine laugh I had heard from him in months, and it felt like a balm to my soul. But healing is never a straight path. There were setbacks, moments when the past mistakes cast long shadows. Sometimes he would shut down, retreating into silence, or snap at me for no clear reason. I had to remind myself to be patient, to hold space for his feelings without taking them personally. I also knew that part of this healing had to involve him taking responsibility for his actions. I couldn't protect him from every consequence, and he needed to learn that respect and honesty are the foundations of any relationship. So we made a plan, a promise to be truthful with each other even when it was hard. To share our fears and frustrations without fear of rejection. To ask for help when we needed it and to forgive when mistakes were made. This promise was not just words. It became our daily practice. One morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my bedroom door. It was from him. It said, "Thank you for not giving up on me. I want to be better for you and for myself." That note meant more to me than anything else. It was clear he was trying to break free from the patterns that had nearly torn us apart. Yet, as much as I wanted to believe everything would be perfect from here on, life had other plans. The challenges he faced outside our home were real and complicated. Peer pressure, expectations, and his own inner doubts often pushed him in directions I feared. One day I found out he had been skipping school. Not often, but enough to worry me deeply. When I confronted him, he admitted he was struggling to keep up with the workload and feeling overwhelmed. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about feeling lost and unsure. Instead of punishment, I offered help. We talked about tutoring, organizing his time better, and setting small goals. It was a step and a sign that our relationship was strong enough for honesty to surface even in difficult moments. There were also moments when he shared secrets, things that hurt him, things he was ashamed of. I never judged or dismissed those feelings. Instead, I held him close and reminded him that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. Throughout all this, I learned an important truth, that love is not always about grand gestures or perfect moments. Often, it is found in the quiet persistence to stay connected, to listen, and to forgive. My son and I were far from perfect. We stumbled, we argued, and sometimes we just sat in silence. But slowly the walls between us were coming down, brick by brick. One night he surprised me by asking to help with dinner. We cooked together, laughing and chatting like old friends. For a moment, I saw the boy I remembered before the silence and distance took hold. That night, before he went to bed, he said, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I'm trying to be better." And I told him, "I'm proud of you. Keep trying. That's all I ask." The journey wasn't over. In fact, it felt like just the beginning. But we were walking it together now, with honesty, patience, and love leading the way. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's that even when it feels like relationships are breaking, there is always hope for healing. It takes courage to face the truth, to reach out, and to forgive. But it is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter how difficult the path may seem, love and understanding can help guide us home. Days turned into weeks, and as we continued to rebuild our relationship, I realized that the most important changes were happening not just between us, but within my son himself. The young boy who had once seemed so lost was beginning to find his footing again, slowly but surely. One afternoon, I noticed him sitting quietly by the window staring outside. I didn't want to interrupt, but after a while I gently asked, "What are you thinking about?" He hesitated but then spoke honestly. "I'm scared, Mom. Scared I'll mess up again. Scared I'll disappoint you." His words cut through me. I took a deep breath and said, "Son, no one is perfect. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them. You don't have to be afraid to try. I believe in you." That conversation felt like a turning point. For the first time, I saw him open up about his fears and hopes without hesitation. He started sharing more about his day-to-day struggles, about friends, school, and the pressure he felt to fit in. One evening, he told me about a new friend he had made, someone who didn't judge him and accepted him for who he was. It was a relief to hear he had found positive support. We even planned to invite this friend over for dinner one day. Alongside these emotional changes, I saw my son growing more responsible. He began helping out around the house without being asked and started focusing more on his schoolwork. It was not perfect and there were still moments of tension, but the overall progress was heartening. Despite this progress, there was one thing I could not shake: the memory of that night when he had sneaked into my room. It was a complicated feeling, one that mixed worry with hope. I wondered what had really been going through his mind, what fears or needs had driven him to do that. One evening after dinner, I decided to ask him gently about that night. "Do you want to talk about what happened when you came into my room?" He looked surprised but nodded slowly. "I was feeling really scared and alone. I didn't know how to say it, so I just wanted to be close to you, even if I couldn't put it into words." His honesty touched me deeply. "Thank you for telling me. You don't have to be alone with your fears. We'll face them together." That night, something shifted between us, a deeper level of trust, perhaps. It was clear that our relationship was growing stronger, built on patience and understanding. But as much as I wanted to believe we were on a smooth path, challenges continued to arise. Sometimes old habits and doubts would creep back in, leading to arguments or silence. Those moments were difficult and I had to remind myself to stay calm and keep the door open. One particularly hard day, my son got into a disagreement with one of his teachers. He came home frustrated and angry, feeling misunderstood and unfairly judged. I listened carefully, acknowledging his feelings without immediately offering solutions. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," I said. "It's okay to feel upset. But maybe we can find a way to talk to your teacher together? Sometimes they don't see everything we do." To my surprise, he agreed. The next day, we wrote an email to the teacher explaining his concerns calmly and respectfully. The teacher replied kindly, offering to meet and discuss how to support him better. That small victory showed me how far he had come, learning to stand up for himself in a mature way with support and guidance. Around this time, I also noticed he was spending more time outside, going for walks or riding his bike. I encouraged these healthy habits, knowing that physical activity could help clear his mind and reduce stress. One weekend, we took a short trip to a nearby park. It was simple, just the two of us walking among the trees, talking about everything and nothing. Those moments felt precious, a chance to reconnect without distractions. In the quiet of the park, my son shared more about his dreams, about what he wanted to be when he grew up, the kind of person he hoped to become. It was inspiring to hear his hopes, and I promised to support him every step of the way. As weeks passed, I realized that healing our relationship was about more than fixing past mistakes. It was about building a new foundation of trust, respect, and love that could withstand the ups and downs of life. We celebrated small successes, good grades, kind actions, honest conversations, like milestones on a long journey. One evening, after a good day at school, my son hugged me tightly and said, "Thanks for never giving up on me." Tears filled my eyes as I held him close. "I love you. Always." Looking back, I understood that love is a powerful force, one that can heal wounds and bridge distances if we allow it. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I felt hopeful, because now we were walking it together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Life after that moment, the night my son sneaked into my room, felt like walking on a tightrope. Every day brought a mix of hope and uncertainty. I knew deep down that things had to change, but how? And would those changes last? The mornings became my favorite time. I'd wake up early before anyone else and sit quietly with a cup of tea. It gave me a chance to gather my thoughts and prepare myself for the day ahead. Because caring for a troubled teen, especially when you've shared a complicated past, is not easy. It requires patience, understanding, and constant love. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, I heard footsteps on the stairs. My son appeared, rubbing his eyes, looking a little less guarded than usual. He came over and sat beside me without a word. For a moment we just sat in silence, the kind that didn't feel heavy but peaceful. Then quietly he said, "Mom, can we talk?" I nodded, heart pounding. "Of course." He looked down, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "I've been thinking about what happened that night. I was scared and I didn't know how to say it, so I just came to you." I smiled softly. "I'm glad you did." He took a deep breath and said, "I don't want to keep hiding my feelings anymore. It's just, sometimes it's hard to explain what's going on inside." "I understand," I said. "And that's okay. You don't have to have all the answers right away. You can take your time." That day marked a new chapter. My son started opening up more, sharing bits of his world, his struggles, his hopes, even his fears. Sometimes his words were jumbled, sometimes hesitant, but the fact that he was trying meant everything. We worked together on small things. For example, he was nervous about school presentations, so I helped him practice at home. We would rehearse his speeches and I gave him tips on how to stay calm. Slowly I saw him growing more confident. At school things weren't perfect. There were still challenges with classmates who didn't understand him or situations that overwhelmed him. But he faced them with more courage than before, and I was proud of every step forward. One afternoon he came home and said, "Mom, I made a new friend. His name is Sam." "That's wonderful," I replied. "Tell me about him." "He's different from the others. He listens. He doesn't make fun of me." I smiled, grateful that my son was finding a positive influence. I invited Sam over for dinner, and watching them talk and laugh reminded me that healing is possible. Meanwhile, our home felt lighter, less tense. We laughed more and argued less. The trust we were rebuilding was fragile but growing stronger day by day. Yet, I knew there would be tough times ahead. Some nights, my son would retreat into silence, shutting me out. I respected those moments, letting him know I was there whenever he was ready. One evening, he surprised me by asking, "Mom, can we watch a movie together?" I agreed happily, and as we sat side by side on the couch, I realized these small moments of connection were the foundation of our renewed bond. Around this time, I also focused on my own self-care. It was important for me to stay strong and patient, so I took time to read, walk in nature, and connect with friends. Being a supportive parent means taking care of yourself too. As weeks turned into months, I noticed my son's laughter returning. He was discovering joy in simple things, playing games, riding his bike, or just talking. One day he told me, "I want to do better. Not just for you but for me." Those words warmed my heart. I promised to be by his side no matter what. We continued to face obstacles, misunderstandings, bad days, and moments of doubt. But the difference was now we faced them together. My son was learning that mistakes don't define you, but how you respond to them does. And I was learning that unconditional love can heal even the deepest wounds. Looking back, I realized the night he sneaked into my room was not just a moment of fear or confusion. It was a silent cry for connection, for reassurance, for hope. And in answering that call with open arms, we found a new beginning. The days that followed brought a mix of calm and storm. While my son and I had started to rebuild our trust, the road ahead was still uncertain. Some mornings I woke up hopeful, only to feel my heart sink by nightfall. Parenting a child who's been through so much means living with constant ups and downs. One afternoon, I was cleaning the living room when my son came up to me holding a piece of paper. "Mom, look," he said softly. "I wrote this in school." Curious, I took the paper and read. "Sometimes I feel lost. Like I'm walking in the dark without a light. But I want to find my way. I want to be better." Tears welled up in my eyes. This was the first time he'd expressed his feelings in writing, and it showed me how deeply he was struggling inside. But it also gave me hope. He wanted to heal. That evening we sat down together and talked more openly than ever before. I asked him what made him feel lost, what scared him the most. He told me about his fears, not just of school or friends, but of disappointing me and feeling like he wasn't enough. I reassured him gently, telling him how proud I was of every effort he made, no matter how small. "It's okay to feel scared," I said. "It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human." From then on, we made a small but important pact. Whenever either of us felt overwhelmed, we would say so no matter what. Honesty would be our guide. One Saturday, I invited him to join me on a walk in the park. We hadn't spent time like this in a while. The fresh air, the sound of birds, and the gentle rustling of leaves made the world feel less heavy. As we walked, he began talking about his dreams, things he wanted to try, places he wanted to visit, even the kind of person he hoped to become. His words painted a picture of hope and possibility. It was as if a cloud was lifting, revealing a brighter sky underneath. Over the next few weeks, we built routines that helped him feel more grounded. We cooked meals together, went biking, and even started a small garden in the backyard. These simple activities brought moments of joy and normalcy back into our lives. One evening, as we watered the plants, he said, "Mom, thanks for sticking with me." I hugged him tightly. Always. No matter what. Despite the progress, there were still hard days. Sometimes old feelings would bubble up unexpectedly: frustration, sadness, anger. On those days, I reminded him and myself that healing is not a straight line. It's messy and slow, but every step counts. I also encouraged him to find healthy ways to express himself, like drawing, writing, or even just talking. These outlets helped him release emotions that were hard to say out loud. School became easier too. His teachers noticed a change. He was more engaged, more willing to ask for help. A few classmates started reaching out, and he made a couple of new friends who treated him with kindness. One afternoon, his counselor called me to share good news. My son had been participating in group activities and showing signs of leadership. It was a huge step forward, and I couldn't stop smiling. But the real victory was in the quiet moments at home. A genuine laugh, a hug, a thank you said without hesitation. Looking back, I realized that the night he snuck into my room was a turning point. It was his way of reaching out, even if he didn't fully understand it himself. We had crossed a difficult boundary, yes, but it led us to build new ones, healthier and stronger. Now, as I watch him grow and find his way, I'm reminded of how important it is to never give up on the people you love. No matter how dark things seem, there is always a chance for light. And sometimes all it takes is one small step or one brave night to begin that journey. After weeks of steady progress, things between my son and me began to feel more hopeful than ever. The tension that had once filled our home was slowly replaced by small moments of peace and understanding. But healing isn't always straightforward, and that's something I was learning every day. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my son came up behind me and quietly said, "Mom, can we talk?" I turned around, surprised by the seriousness in his voice. "Of course," I said, setting down the spoon and giving him my full attention. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I want to tell you something. Something I've been keeping inside for a long time." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I know I made mistakes and I hurt you. I'm sorry for that. Sometimes I didn't know how to act or what to say. I felt so confused." His words touched my heart deeply. This was the first time he was openly admitting his feelings and taking responsibility. It showed me how much he had been reflecting and growing. I reached out and took his hand gently. "Thank you for telling me. That means a lot. We all make mistakes, but what matters is that we learn from them and keep trying to do better." We talked for a long time that night, about fears, hopes, and the future. He told me about his dreams: to finish school, find a job he liked, and maybe one day start a family of his own. Listening to him, I felt a new sense of connection. A bridge being built where once there was distance. The next days were filled with new routines. We continued our walks, shared meals, and even started working on a small project together: organizing the garage. It was something simple, but working side by side gave us a chance to talk casually, laugh, and enjoy each other's company without pressure. One afternoon, I caught him smiling at a joke I made, and I realized how much he had changed. That moment of happiness was like a small victory, proof that the shadows were lifting. Despite these positive changes, challenges still arose. Sometimes old habits or frustrations would return, and we'd have to remind ourselves to be patient. One weekend, I noticed he seemed quieter than usual. When I gently asked if everything was okay, he shrugged and said, "Just tired, I guess." I didn't push, but I kept an eye on him, knowing sometimes silence hides deeper feelings. A few days later, he opened up again. He told me about a tough day at school where he felt misunderstood by a teacher and left out by some classmates. It hurt him more than he wanted to admit. We talked about ways to handle those feelings, how to stand up for himself calmly, and how to reach out for support when things get hard. I reminded him he wasn't alone, and that I was always there to listen no matter what. Those conversations became a pattern. Sometimes serious, sometimes lighthearted, but always honest. We were building a foundation of trust that felt stronger than before. As the weeks passed, I saw my son becoming more confident. He started volunteering for school events, joining clubs, and even helping younger kids with their homework. His teachers told me they noticed a big change too, how he was more focused, respectful, and eager to learn. One day he surprised me by asking if he could help plan a family gathering. It was a small request, but to me it meant he was ready to take on new responsibilities and build relationships. That evening, as we sat together making lists and sending messages, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We had come so far, from that difficult night when he crossed a boundary that shook us both, to this place of hope and healing. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Life always has its challenges. But now I believed in our strength to face them together. Looking back, I understood that sometimes, the hardest moments in life can teach us the most important lessons about love, forgiveness, and resilience. My son's journey was far from over, but I was proud of the person he was becoming. And I was grateful that we had found a way to move forward, not by forgetting the past but by learning from it. As I watched him that night, quietly working on his homework at the kitchen table, I whispered a silent prayer for his future. A future filled with hope, kindness, and the courage to keep growing. Because in the end, that's what family is all about. Sticking together, supporting each other, and never giving up no matter how hard the road may be.